Hi, everyone. This is Bill Moriarty from the Wisdom Seat. I'm pleased to have for you today our recording from 2018 when we invited Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche to come and give a talk, and he came, thankfully, and spoke at Swarthmore College. He had a new book out at the time called Training in Tenderness, Buddhist Teachings on Tsewa, the Radical Openness of Heart that Can Change the World. And one personal note on this, this is the first time I got to meet Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche. He's a very elegant person to be around. And at the end of the public talk, I'm usually running around wrapping up cables, putting away a lot of chairs, putting away a lot of stuff with everybody. And he had left, but he sent somebody back in to find me just to give me a copy of the book where he had written a little note, a little inscription for me. And I was just touched that he made time for that. So please enjoy this talk from Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche.
I'd like to thank everybody coming tonight. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Rinpoche for coming to Philadelphia. I would also like to thank the Wisdom Seat for hosting this event. If you want to get on their mailing list, there is a sign-up sheet. They host many teachers from many traditions, so I would like to thank the people who help organize this from the Wisdom Seat. I have a great opportunity to introduce Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche to Philadelphia. Thank you, Rinpoche. I have known Rinpoche for many, many years since he first came here in 1989. I've been blessed in my life. When Rinpoche, I'm going to go off strip here and tell a little story. When Rinpoche first came to the West, there was two things that he was fascinated with the Western mind. First was, I think, our neurosis with our parents. Our neurosis with our parents.
Oh, okay.
Coming from a tradition where everybody is your mother, and people have great respect for their lineage. The second thing was students used to come up and say, I'm feeling stress and I'm feeling pressure. And Rinpoche, coming from a culture where he came from, didn't really understand that. So a little history with Rinpoche. He grew up in a monastic environment, received a sense of training in all the Buddhist doctrines. In 1990, he began a 5-year tenure as a professor of Buddhist philosophy at Naropa Institute. And he did that for 5 years. I think after those 5 years, he began to understand pressure and stress. At that point, he started a retreat center in Crestone in southern Colorado, where he guided, and he himself went in, did 5-year retreats. Rinpoche is still guiding students in long-term retreats. When Rinpoche is not teaching, he is also in retreat at Crestone. His lineage is growing. He has a center in the hills outside of Boulder, Colorado, and there's also a retreat center that he started up in central Vermont. There's information on the tables out there. After Rinpoche's talk, he will be doing a book signing. We'll do it right here. We'll put up some chairs. His new book is available outside. So I took up too much time. Sorry, Rinpoche, and thank you for coming to Philadelphia.
Thank you. Ngorado de Gozungova Jimmy Jandalos and the Zandama and then Jajo, Gangre Gazanda, among Gazan the Benalahians, and Besos, Lusa, and the Gumu de Jo, to Jenda Makuni, the Julians and Jejuns. The one Bamagaba Shabet and Dalo Banzo, Jo, Udians and Yabim the Mole, Jayugan and Jado, and then Bezi and Mamo, Pemanjun and Dalabet. Zamne de Vejinu Junior, the Anto Julondonia Bedonga, Narudama Bedu, on the Jugo Jamba, the music, Lajandalo, the Namagunya Big, and the Bebulado, and you made the Dunalong. Yonzen Dojinzo and the Lazon dem Samanelong, Janam Jo, Gadin Guimin, and Agawa, and Jubajan Galaso, and the Kizakuno, to me, the end of the Denzo, Zalonjan again, and Yoruba, and Jimmy Migalaj. To Zunga Manjuna, I made the Johnson Jelumba, and the Bebin and Josodolo, and Jimmy Dunley, the so and the Bobanjidin, also to Jedo, and the Waddle, and the Bedebanjo, and the Zetin, the Lonjan and Jimmy J. and you go so on there, to Sunja, Jesobemanjo, and Jalo Doja, Gunjima Mala, you made two ages on the Baba, and you don't get so on there, just a Gunja to Vajimbola, and Bess on Joseph on the bed. Chicken don't end the end of Allah, don't let in Jell Maso on the Angon, not on the Eroga, and a Bemanjunik, and Bodin, Jalo Dorjica, and Jimmy, Doja so on there, so the Javis Bokavala, not to be on the Kawara. Some Banjadungar and Dongo, and Jimmy Chuja was so on the Jusun and the Ladangan, yes, not Bobaman, Rodanza, so you take all the Nade, Boman, the Galaso. By development, the Kia, Ganjunya, and what on jet, and the Gunji Jabola, imagine the Ombozo and the Kizakun, the Jadu, the Devil, and the Ludu, the Gunjadab. The Nikin Jimbozo and the Jimurkunda Dojo Doji, Choguru Bonds, and Megwin Bag, and Juju the India, Juling Vigalazo and there, Gonjamaragunus and Ale, Gombolon and Bobet. On Login the Jantan Adaja, and the Damanda Dazo and the Ojan and the Jimurun Logic, the Jujus and the Bar in the Nuan Juja, but then make. Kunde Jugon da Jimboda, not the Boss on the Insus, and Rojugon on your bar, can't give it Dojo and the Chijen the Baron Young and the Yellow, the Mongada in the Yellow, the Bajiman, the Long on the Island of the Main. San Jujingo and Jumala, Kunsan Jugo Malan Jamba, Yemingagon was on there to Ejid and the person yellow, the Jazzy Yellow Duja, on the Lavendam Reginica, Summit in the Rogabala, Nina on the Dajus in Yell. The Ragadians of Jesus on met the Vedanatum, the Denula Messenger Gojaji, and the meetings of the so on there, the Menam, the Melama, the Melam, the Megoman, the Mendola, the Jedi, and the Kidin, so on there, and not doing along the Jewish, Kijimedo Gajan, the Kizendolaji, Kijija, and the Jeso on there, the Alamanjabella Madan, the Melaman, Alamala, and just on the Junda, the way, and the Nego. So and so do changes, and doesn't know Lona Jula, Joan, the Zolo, Jusan was in Gelados, or Julan. Landa was in Gelados, or tonight, get the jaws in Gelados, and Meadow, the Madon, the Modos, and Yanos, Modern Jola, Major. Joa the Dalan, Joa just on the odd and Jimmy Caban, and Jizzy, and Guyan, so I go out in the night. Some Jedaki Janjo Jambo, Majidon, when you get jails on Jusan Jabodon, on Jusan Bella, the Darim Ginevat. Taking dollar in the doors on just an edge, taking the Nalabala, and buying the Labor. Good evening to you all. Thank you very much for coming here tonight. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for hosting us here. This book that we recently produced, we hope that this book and the idea of the Tsewa, which I'm going to be explaining what it means, will really spread in the world and as well as also in each and every home of this country as well as other countries, to enhance the joy and happiness of having this precious human life, and just with the mind and just with opening of one's own heart, how much unconditionally one can find a source of happiness or happiness itself without requiring the kind of external conditions of happiness or joy. And before I go further into explaining this, I want Joy-san to read a little bit from the book so that there's a taste of the book that everyone can get, and maybe read it less than what you read.
This is from the first chapter called Like Oxygen. We human beings are not like weeds in an untended garden that grow up and survive without any care. We depend on having affection in our lives. As soon as your mother became aware of your existence in her womb, she began pouring all her love and tenderness into you. Then, once you emerged into the world, you wouldn't have survived a day without her love. As you grew up, you continually received her warmth, or at least the warmth of some family member or loving human being. Thanks to receiving Tsewa, you have become an adult capable of standing on your own 2 feet. Thanks to Tsewa, you can now look after yourself and your family and contribute something to society. If you hadn't received so much love throughout your life, you would not feel any security or strength inside. You would not have a sound mind. Our well-being also depends on our expressing Tsewa to others. From our early childhood, we have been learning to open our heart to parents, siblings, friends, and pets. If our heart had never developed the ability to feel warmth toward others, if there were no one toward whom we felt tenderness, closeness, and trust, we would now be in a state of painful isolation. Our mind would be imprisoned in a miserable state of narcissism. Of course, the happiness and sound mind we enjoy are only relative. We can acknowledge that our mind isn't totally blissful and free from confusion like the Buddha or the great sages of the past and present. We have a long way to go. Still, there are so many fortunate aspects to our lives and minds that we have to appreciate. And when we appreciate them, we should examine where they come from. What is their source? But
I think we could just leave it there. So, the idea of being a good person, or idea of being a kind person, or compassionate person, has to do with where one's state of mind, where one's heart is. And there's a general kind of thought that either you are a kind person or either you're not so kind person. But training to be a kind person is not so often thought of. But if we really examine the great masters of the past or the sages of the past, yes, maybe they are that are born with a very kind heart and compassionate heart. But many also train themselves to be kind and compassionate along the way and achieved it. And having worked on one's own heart to be kind and compassionate and achieved it is a much more of a reliable And also, it is much more of an using one's also creatively one's own mind, as well as also using one's own innate intelligence as how one can actually train oneself to be kind and compassionate, or the source of the kind and compassionate mind or heart being open-hearted person. Oftentimes I say, and this is something that I have observed, that many people could, with a certain particular kind of situations or particular object of their affection, they can be very kind, they can be very compassionate, and they can have an immense amount of dedication to serve. But then it can switch. It can switch with someone else and get really angry. And not only really angry, but also hurtful. So what is the basis to be kind and to be compassionate and to be caring? If it is just only whom we choose to be kind, whom we choose to be compassionate, whom we have some pre-existent relation that is biological or some sort of our own natural likings, then what do we do with the rest of the humanity? What do we do with the rest of the living beings that also we live, that also we live with and we share the planet with? So if there is an actually potential to be kind, potential to be compassionate, and if there is enough source to one particular object, why not expand that? Why not expand that and make it more inclusive and more inclusive of as much as you can to improve the state of mind of one's own and one's relation with others. That can be a mutual benefit. That can be a benefit to the self, and that could be a benefit to the others as the relationship improves. And not only with oneself and with the human beings who we share this world, but why not with the planet itself, the environment itself, so as also other living beings in the planet, such as the numerous dying species of animals. So, what is the source of being kind and compassionate, which all religion teaches, which is the sort of like a core of all religion, which all religion teaches well, and all religion all traditions of contemplative meditation rest upon how one can actually convey the message of kindness and compassion of that particular religion into the world, so that the world will have in us some greater kind of an improvement, or that particular religion can be a beacon of that world and shine as a light on that world. So in the Buddhism, we have the Mahayana training. In the Mahayana training, really, it's about how we can actually open our hearts. Now, when we are talking about opening our hearts, we're not talking about this flesh heart. You know, when you have to open your flesh heart, it's not good news. We are talking about how to open our mind that is able to feel for others. It is our own attitude that stays open and receptive of other people's lives and the conditions of lives. Not immediately closing down, just as in the first glance, just as in the first 5 minutes of interactions, with some judgment of our own. That is precondition for us to repeatedly do in our interactions. And then also to be able to visualize where everyone is, what is going on, what are the, not just the outside, the facade, what you see, but what is the inside that man or woman or child in that condition is going through. What is the experience of that? Might like and be. How would you feel that if you are in that condition? If you experience those things, what would be the kind of immediate joy or happiness would that be? Or what would be the immediate pain and suffering that it would be? To be able to vicariously to experience others' life and conditions and the experience, others' experience through using one's own imagination. This is really what it means of opening one's heart. This is what it means of opening one's heart and making it tender. Of course, there has to be an intention. You know, without an intention, one wouldn't be doing this in the first place. But with an intention and with some trust that there is a sort of a way of getting in touch with the others in this manner and in this way, which can actually make one's own mind and heart more open and more receptive and more free of a pre-existing shutdown mechanism, and keep it open, and keep it open with some inquiries, some deeper level of inquiries of putting yourself in the other's shoes. imagining the experiences that you would maybe perhaps never have other than putting yourself in the other's shoes in your imaginations. Just like what we do when we go to see movies, but not with always with the movies playing in front of us, but doing it creatively on one's own, in one's kind of contemplations, in one's own interest of knowing where others are. Now, the way that is achieved in the Buddhist, in the path of meditation and contemplation, is first to come in touch with oneself, is very important. Without coming in touch with oneself, it is very difficult to jump right away to know and be in touch with others. And the way you come in touch with yourself also has to have some theme to sort of explore. So that would be just not only going and going and going with your life, with the drives, with the ambitions, with the kind of all of the ideas of what needs to be achieved and what will be good, and how others will perceive you, or how you would perceive yourself, or how the society is shaped. So some amount of that is natural. But then in private times, in good times of your own alone, in park, on your own bed, while you're not able to fall asleep, or just in a quiet time with a cup of tea, just really to see where you are. What are you doing? What is the reason you're doing what you're doing? What is the bottom line aspiration? What is the kind of experience that you're imagining to achieve from the outcome of this endeavor? So in that way, when you actually ask open-ended questions to yourself, you will come to know that underneath, under all of the efforts of our everyday and lifetime effort of what we do and how we engage ourselves in to the world, there is a deep aspiration for happiness, joy in our mind. All of this, what we are doing, if it doesn't mount up to being some reasonable, authentic, sensible, a joy and happiness and a fulfillment, then there's really no point. Since we are imagining some happiness and joy and fulfillment and making this life in that way are worthy to live and lived on for ourselves or for our family members, then that's why we are engaged in these ways. So getting in touch with this fundamental level of one's own aspiration and aspiration for happiness and joy and fulfillment and a meaningful life in the ways that we are imagining to be or become or increase, that has nothing to do with, being self-centered or egotistical or being anyway problematic. As a living being, that is our birthright. To be happy, to have a joy, to have a fulfillment, to have a meaningful life. We are born here to experience that in the maximum level, in the most progressive level. Need is also there. When that's lacking, life is becoming unpleasant. When some of that is there, however life is challenging, we feel resilient. We feel able to overcome the challenges. So need is there also. So getting in touch with that, and then the question is, we have these aspirations for ourselves. But then, do we have that kind of an aspirations for others? Do we spend any time making that kind of an aspiration or being locked into that kind of an aspiration on behalf of others? Now, if we do not spend any time and we are never locked into making that kind of aspirations for others, then the question is, why not? Does that actually, by doing so, decreases our own sort of like a chances of achieving our aspirations? Does that damper anyway our own possibilities of achieving happiness and joy and fulfillment? No. In the contrary, it helps. So then why not? Since if you look it out, all living beings, and particularly all human beings, everyone in the Philadelphia, everyone in New York City that we see people walking, all are carrying this in their hearts. And that's a very much the tenderness that one has for oneself. But why not share that tenderness with the others? Focusing, turning one's mind out to the other living beings as you are living being. As you have this need, others have that need. As you see conditions can help to achieve this or to make one's life better and different and much more of a fruitful, others see that too. So therefore, why not spend some time? Though there is no habit of doing that, why not develop a new habit of doing that? It's almost like we just don't have the introduction of this new habit in our system of mind or in our makeup of mind. Why not bring that into our system of mind, makeup of our mind, and develop this new habit and then open our heart? As if almost like you have not developed that muscle. We don't have this muscle developed inside of us. To develop this new muscle and thus then open up our hearts to others. And in doing so, and particularly to feel more tender, to really think about things in a deeper level than just in the surface level. That's what's going on. Recently, I was in India, and in a busy street, I saw a child naked on the pavement that is size of this hand. Just alive and wide awake and moving. Immediately my heart leaped out of my chest and went for the child. And then I was looking, everyone else who were actually seeing the child also did that too. Then I was thinking, everyone has this tender heart that leaps out of your chest. You see it right there in this condition, in this situation. So then I kept on thinking, why? If it is a toy decoy of a child, would that be the same? No, it won't be the same. Because it's a living being. That's why our hearts leap. It has a life and it feels. That's why our heart leaps. Then I kept on thinking, why? Because this living being, so vulnerable. That's why our heart leaps. So unprotected. That's why our heart leaps. Needs so much of conditions to grow from that stage to another stage, more sort of secured, more protected, more stronger, independent, liberated from prior conditions. That's why our heart leaps. These are all registered in our unconscious mind right away. And that's what makes our heart leap, even though we are not able to process all of this right away. But it's all registered in our unconscious mind, and then that's why our heart leaps. So then I keep on thinking, since there is that potential for one's heart to leap for another living being, seeing in a condition like that, so vulnerable, so unprotected, so much need of an improvement from the present situation and the conditions, why not think about all of the people that are also so vulnerable? in this country, for example. So many of our aging father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, great-grandfather, grandmother, who are in the nursing homes, so vulnerable. So as also so many of the orphans from a young as a maybe couple of weeks old to 1 year old, 2 year old, 3 year old in a foster homes. So as also so many of the mentally troubled that has so much of a suffering that they can't help. In the mental institutions that are suffering immensely. And then also so many of the people who are actually on the streets, homeless, living with the bags and carts, while the country itself is so prosperous. Suffering day in and day out with the weather and harassments of all sorts. Then, if you look into, furthermore, even a normal people living in a home, houses that is bigger than the mansions of the old days, working so hard, overworked, mentally and physically exhausted, totally run down, with no sort of like a way out. Then just keep on. Because we have to support all of this, what we have as what we thought would be our needs. So in this way, if we actually look into anyone, everyone, by taking time, there is a vulnerability that is immeasurable. There is an immense amount of an unknown what is going to come of their lives, where it's being headed. There is tremendous amount of a need of a protection, securities, a sense of an really changing for the better of an some kind of an true, real, genuine, sustainable happiness. And genuine, true, sustainable happiness doesn't come from outside. That the way we are actually fixated on the outside as how we could actually get happiness, this is all, a lot of the times, is with attachments, with the greed. We know attachment doesn't serve. We know greed doesn't serve. We know, however, we don't know any other ways than being attached and being greedy to what we want to obtain. But it makes the life quite miserable from inside with this kind of an over excessive attachments and greed that increases inside of us. So it's also, there's a lot of course, hopes, and with the hopes comes fear. And with the fear comes immense amount of anxieties, and everyone almost, or half of, or maybe the lot of a number is on a medication to calm down the anxieties. But where is all of this going to lead? What is all of this kind of attachment based that we live our lives and that we actually keep on living our lives? Just like imagine the attachment that we have with our own bodies, that we know at some point we will have to leave behind. How this attachment is going to, at some point, be not able to succeed to keep this body. How that's going to be. So in this way, there's so much really ways that you could open your mind to others' lives and the conditions and vulnerabilities and to their own aspirations and to their own aspirations to be fulfilled and making aspirations on behalf of their aspirations and their lives, so that one can actually almost be them, unite with them. Like others' happiness is your happiness. Others' suffering as your suffering. That the division between others' happiness and your happiness is really only your own self-protectiveness. Misunderstanding of somehow, if you work on your happiness, you could increase your happiness. And therefore, you're responsible for your happiness. But in reality, as an accord, interdependently how we live and how the world works, how even a family works, how a community works, how a small business works. It works with the really sharing responsibilities, sharing goals and aims and aspirations, and making it all one, that one is part of, that oneness. And in that way, only one's own happiness increases, family's happiness increases, so as actually community happiness increases, so as the global happiness increases as well. So therefore, taking the time to really explore first what's your happiness is, aspirations are, then coming to know of others' aspirations and others' happiness. And then being able to really, genuinely, not as in a somehow physiologically, biologically, by some kind of like a strange chance of a coincidence that you are bond with somebody, that you are consciously, constructively thinking of opening up your heart with the tender feelings and thus be engaged with others in your mind, and thus keep your mind and heart kind and compassionate. And kind and compassionate doesn't mean that you could always be generous, and that you should be always generous, and that you could change the lives of others just as you intend. Kind and compassionate mind as in a seed that is to grow to become a generous and help and benefit where it can be fertile ground, where it's a healthy ground, where it can grow as into a kind of a beautiful flowers or trees. Always there has to be a discernment as well to accompany the kindness and compassion and one's good heart as when you take it into an action. Without the discernment, though we appreciate the open heart and tender heart and heart that feels a lot for others, and we have the kindness and the aspirations of the kindness, we have the compassion and the aspirations that springs from the compassion. But in action, when you go about to engage, there has to be a discernment as well, whether that is going to be a, first of all, mutual benefit. Second, even if it is exclusively to be a benefit of others without so much of the benefit of the self, is that going to be just your own some kind of your own trip? Or idiot kind of compassion that will not actually bear fruit, but that will maybe perhaps make things worse. There has to be some discernment. Discernment has to guide the engagement, alone with the warm heart, alone with the kindness, alone with the compassionate mind. And in doing so, also there has to be a limit of your own. Limit of your own that you could actually sit well, and that you could sit well without feeling you are yourself compromised here. You yourself are compromised so that you will later have a regrets. And later that you would actually be sort of like, instead of doing something in a small amount or in a manageable amount, consistently doing something large and then have a regrets and then retract and never do again. All of those is really a pre-discernment that one has to have. One must have, that one should actually allow oneself to have without any pressures, without any religiosity and the doctrinations of a good heart some sort, so that it can be natural, it can be authentic, it can be a genuinely and truly your path of a growth. But having the intention, having the effort and having the effort be consistent, and having the effort being consistent to sort of really shape your heart and shape your mind on the basis of wisdom and on the basis of practice, then to know that this is the meaning of this life. There's no other further meaning than this. This is the path of awakening. There's no path other than this to awakening. To know this is how the sages of the past have walked on this earth and brought their potential to the full bloom. There's no mystery as to how they got where they got. It is actually by their deeds, and if you analyze by their deeds what they have done, it is in this way they were able to actually manifest in their own lives from a child and child growing into a more and more matured human being, and then more and more matured human being into an sages. So, living life in this way, as a great sage of a Tibetan named Kongtrul Rinpoche, a wandering yogi, stated in his prayers that he has made, while living, holding no any ill intentions towards anyone, and with all good intentions filling your heart. When one is faced with the death, may one not face any regrets and difficulties of coming to end of one's life. Then after, may one not face any delusions and the sufferings of any kind, but to be able to continue in this and grow till enlightenment. So in this, I feel the kind of opening of one's heart, changing of one's habit, feeling tender, and the ways to feel tender and ways to keep one's mind and heart open and tender by making aspirations on behalf of others, and then really using one's mind and innate ability of the mind to visualize and think on many greater levels, as a writer would do, or as a director would do, or as any kind of a creative person will do, and not being also completely off track, but authentic as it could be, similar to the lives of what others are living, and then feel one's own heart in the fullest of Tsewa, which is, in other words, is a love. I think we can all do a lot to change the world. We could all do a lot to change the society. We could all do a lot to change the environment. We could all do a lot to closely to change each other's life, especially within the small family of three, two parents and one son and daughter. If a father sits down to think what is the aspiration of wife, of mine, in a deep ways. And what is the aspiration of my daughter in a deep ways? What is the aspiration of my son in a deep ways? What is the vulnerabilities and the internal life of my wife as it is manifesting here right now in this very household? What is the internal life of my son and daughter as is manifesting right now here in this household, which I can actually sympathize, which I can actually not only sympathize, but add something to them to grow stronger, more secure, more actually protected, more actually in a conditions to be able to fulfill their aspirations. Rather than sort of working and working and working and working and earning and earning and earning, something that earning can do all the difference. And buying can do all the difference. Giving gifts can do all the difference. If one can actually take the time to contemplate and sit in that way, I think the quality of the family life is going to be much more different and changed. And there will be much more sense of connectedness, not alienations. There's a major suffering that is going on in every household with a much more of with the smartphones and with the televisions and with all of the sort of people always engage in the technology from one another. And that is adding to the suffering that already existed there. So it could actually change in that way. And then if there's some dialogue, or even if there's no really a constructive dialogue that you could have, and there's no necessarily the maturity of the family communication to be in the way to have a dialogue, at least in one's own mind, to become much more apt as where actually others are, and feel and know where others are, and then try to sort of make oneself more available in that way, and much more loving in that way. Loving not in a sense of a traditional, by buying gifts, but loving in a sense of being much more present. It can actually really change for the better, I believe, I hope. And that's the really my aspiration here, to be speaking about the Tsewa when I actually really feel that, if there is a Tsewa in any household, there is unhappiness, And with everything else that one achieves, it is an ornament, and it is an enhancement. Without the Tsewa, without the love, anything and everything else is a shell, only a shell, not as real, authentic happiness. So if we could have the Tsewa just based on not really doing much of an external work, but internal work of engaging with our own mind, which you all are very, very educated and very, very much actually also interested in the kind of idea of spiritual life and contemplations and the practice of meditation, otherwise you wouldn't be here. I think we can actually achieve so much by focusing our mind on the Tsewa, or the opening of our hearts in that way. And thank you all very much for coming here today. By this merit may I obtain nominations, may defeat any wrongdoing from the struggle ways the birth, the royal, from the ocean of samsara, may free all beings. May Bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has come to never fail but grow ever more and more. Thank you very much.